Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special episode of The Talk Zone. Very excited to have a video episode here today. And the reason for that is because we have a one-of-a-kind filmmaker joining us today. And this is someone who, man, this is very distracting. I'm like, who should I be looking at? Should I be looking at this camera or this one? Or does it even matter? It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. You just pretend your audience doesn't exist for this episode.
Well, luckily they don't. So I guess that should be very easy for me. Yeah, this is a filmmaker, someone who I work with, and someone I'm very excited to sit down and speak with today. The one and only Bryce Ury.
You got it right.
I got it right.
Mm-hmm.
I've never said your last name until this morning today.
I was actually just wondering this morning, is it Acri?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's Acri.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. I don't think I've ever heard your name pronounced.
Yeah.
That's strange. I've only seen it on messaging. So
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Yeah, it's something that I've had to deal with for, my whole life. Everyone I've ever met has mispronounced my last name. And it's fine. I don't have feelings about it. But one time when I was in 8th grade, I had a math teacher pronounce my last name incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, excuse me, Miss Teacher, it's actually Acri. And she goes, actually, it's pronounced Acri the way that it's written. And I was like,
Wow. Ultimate power move.
yeah, from a math teacher,
Mm.
no less,
Do you know anything about the origins of that name? Does that have anything to do with like I own acres of land?
I think it does. Yeah, I think if you look at the I don't think genealogy or etymology is maybe that's the word for it, but it's Old English.
Mm.
It means one who obviously owns acres, right? Which, I feel like that makes you think like, oh, it's like farmer, agriculture, landowner. I mean, clearly someone of wealth and status, right?
Well, that's what I think when I look at you. Yeah.
I look like a king.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently there is in England there is a castle called the Acre. I don't know why I said it like a Scottish guy, but Acre Castle that I would like to maybe visit one day.
Oh yeah,
to
that's
really
awesome.
just like trace back my roots.
There's a river in Scotland called the Ury, I think.
Really?
Yeah, it's spelled differently.
Is that where you're from? Scotland?
That's what I like to think.
Okay.
I've looked into it. I haven't done the whole ancestry thing, but I've looked into my last name and
Okay.
And there's different thoughts about where it comes from, but I'm going to go with the Scottish version because that's I feel like it fits the look a little bit. It's kind of fun. I was visiting a church one time and visited a couple times, and there was this guy that came up to me like a couple weeks after he'd met me, and he handed me this packet.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, I looked into your last name and I found all this information about.
Whoa.
And confession, I didn't read all of it, but it was the River Ury that caught my eye, which was in Scotland. So yeah, it's cool.
That's incredible.
It's always nice to have people just hand you packets about your life and you get to review it and decide what you like and what you don't like.
What are you, an FBI agent? Like, how do you have all this? Like, why did you amass all of this information just for me? Like, what's the scam there?
Yeah, I don't know. He never asked for my credit card number, so I'm good.
Have you been to Scotland?
Yeah, I went on a trip to Scotland in 2015 after I graduated.
Yeah.
From university. Just wanted to take a little backpacking camping trip. Went to Iceland and Ireland with my sister. Mm-hmm. That was about a week long, and then she left, went back to the U.S. and I traipsed up through England, made my way up to Scotland, up around the Scottish Highlands and all those areas, and then made my way back to Ireland and flew back to the U.S.
Okay.
So, it was a fun trip. It was very it made me appreciate people because I was solo for most of it. And
oh wow, wait, you went there by yourself?
Yeah, started with my sister, and then the rest of it I was by myself, and
Okay.
I met with a few friends
Where
on
did
the
she
way. Oh, she just went back to the U.S. It was like
I
we
see.
were just
Okay.
taking kind of a celebratory trip after I graduated,
Yeah.
and but she only had a week, whereas I, after college, was completely aimless, and I had
Yeah.
a month. So
That sounds terrifying that you were able to just live in another country by yourself for a few weeks.
it
I mean, I guess it's an
yeah,
English speaking country, right? So, I mean,
and it's
it's
also
probably
pretty
okay.
safe. I mean, one of the reasons that I went there was there's what's called right to roam, which means you can walk across people's land, you can even camp on people's land as long as you don't mess things up.
Yeah.
And one thing that made me really nervous at first, and then after it happened, I realized, okay, this was a good place to do this kind of trip. I was walking between two cities. I'm forgetting the exact cities I was walking in between, but there was this rundown building that looked like a castle. It was hard to believe that it would be a castle because it was just sort of there and with nobody guarding it or anything. But so I kind of went in and I actually camped out there for the night.
Whoa.
And
Like with a tent and
not a tent, because it was like looked like a ruined castle or something,
Okay.
and so it was covered. So I just
you
set up my
stayed in
sleeping
there.
bag,
Yeah.
and so I get a decent night's rest, but then I wake up and I look up and there's two cops standing above me, looking down at me,
Oh my God.
and I'm thinking, okay, this is where I get in trouble for trespassing,
Yeah.
and they're like, and forgive my Scottish accent, I'll butcher it, but like, oh, so somebody saw your backpack and just we wanted to check in on you, make sure you were all right. Welcome to Scotland. And then they let me go, and I realized, okay, Scottish people are pretty
yeah.
open to to visitors.
That's beautiful.
I actually have a lot of cop stories from that trip. There was another time where I was
A lot of
like,
cops in Scotland.
I was waiting to get on a ferry, and it was like really late. I think it was like 1 or 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't really want to set up my tent because I want to get the earliest ferry that I can get. So I'm just going to kind of hang out by the dock.
Yeah.
And cop pulls up, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get in trouble. And I tell him what I'm doing. He's like, hey, you want to come down to the station? I'll make you some oatmeal or give you some tea. And so I walk and meet him at the police station. He gives me some tea and some oatmeal, and we chat a little bit, and then I go back to the dock and wait a few hours and get on the ferry. So,
wow.
Law enforcement, they're very kind. I can't vouch for their ability to enforce law, but they are very kind. So,
yeah. I mean, I feel like that's that's really a just an endorsement of drinking tea, as a cop. Like cops drinking tea are like, I'll just come over, we'll have some cookies, I'll check on you, make sure you're okay, we'll take you back to the station. It's all good. We'll just chill, we'll have a chat. Coffee drinking cops, they're like, I gotta go right now. Like everything's so much more urgent. They're like, yo, you get it.
Yeah, there's something about that tea that feels a little bit more hospitable.
Yeah.
Let's like kind of relax.
There's no caffeine in my system. I'm so tired. Let's just chill.
Yeah.
That's what it is, I think. Yeah. Well, that's really cool, man. I, unfortunately I have not gotten to travel abroad yet. It's something I really want to do. Do you feel like cause I don't know if we really got into this yet, but obviously the reason that you're here is because you are, you would consider yourself a filmmaker, right? Because you make film, you make films,
I would.
You work on the production team at our agency. I guess I can say Hatfield Media, right? Do you consider the work that you do producing, like commercials and what, do you consider that filmmaking as well?
To a certain degree. I think to motivate yourself, you kind of have to frame your situation in a way that does motivate you. And I feel like considering myself a filmmaker helps motivate me to do the best that I can.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like I'm a video marketer, video producer at Hatfield, but I would consider myself a filmmaker, and there's a lot of overlap as far as techniques you use, and even even stories that you tell. Like often we're telling stories for brands, but sometimes we bring a story that feels a little bit more like a short film to a brand and say, hey, like, do you like this idea, as a way to get eyes on what you're doing? Like a recent example was we did a video for Kentucky Blood Center to help drum up donations.
I saw it. It's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and that was a situation where they came back to us after the first video they made, and they really liked it. And so we actually had some play there where we could kind of nudge them in a certain direction, say, do you like this story idea? And they did. And it ended up, it felt like I was directing a short film, because it was very dramatic, very personal. It was loosely based on an experience my wife and I had in a hospital where with our firstborn, she had to have a blood transfusion. So it's kind of pulled from that and dramatized it a little bit, and it was kind of surreal, because my daughter actually ended up being in the commercial at the end, and so it was kind of like a coming full circle.
So you're saying at the end of the commercial, because the commercial is, if anyone listening hasn't seen it, it's a husband and wife, right? Delivering, mom is delivered a child, or is in the process of delivering a child. She's in some sort of medical danger, and requires you said the baby requires a blood transfusion in the commercial?
No, it's the mom.
That's what I thought. So
she's just given birth, and she's kind of in this crisis mode where nurses are rushing around trying to figure out what's wrong, and she's all pale and unconscious, and her husband's kind of like, what is going on?
Sure. It's terrifying.
And in the middle of that chaos of like caring for his wife, he hears the baby cry, goes, picks up the baby, comforts the baby as the nurses take care of the mom. And they give her a blood transfusion, and she kind of comes back to consciousness, comes back to life. And the husband brings the baby over, and she gets to hold her baby, presumably for the first time. Like, you don't see the whole story, but and it's kind of that moment of like, and we didn't include this line in the commercial, but I just remember when my wife held my son Hector for the first time, not for the first time, but after all that chaos, she held him and said, I would do it all again for you. And that just stuck with me, because it's like, you can have this really scary situation happen where you don't know what the end's going to be. But you know that on the other side, there's something that's worthwhile. And, Hector has been just one of the greatest blessings we've ever experienced. So,
yeah.
And I wanted to capture, he's about to turn 4.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he's got 2 younger siblings now who are about to turn 2. They're twins.
Okay.
And so there was a scene in the commercial that happened, a couple years later, where you see the toddler, the baby has become a toddler now, and so we actually used my daughter for that toddler, and so it was kind of cool to have this personal story being told, and then I got to include one of my family members in there.
But Hector was the child that the commercial was based off of, but your daughter played the child in the commercial.
Yes.
I see what you mean. Okay. For a second, I was like, my gosh, Hector got to play the very character.
Oh, that would be crazy. There was another baby, though, that I'm blanking on her name, but we had to get a newborn baby to be the actual baby, and then my daughter played the toddler. So now, question: in that situation, you acquiring a baby actor, how do you get them to sign an NDA? You kind of put the pen in their hand. And just try to, it's kind of messy, but
I figure you could maybe do like a transfer of the, they do the handprint when they deliver them, right? You could probably maybe like copy that over. Do like ink.
You can. It gets messy though, because ink gets everywhere, and they're babies, so of course she grabbed the ink and just poured it over the contract, and but no, it was.
She knew she wasn't getting what she was promised, originally. Back to the conversation, she's like, I want 2% of the take, and it was 1% of the contract. So she's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah, she said 2%. I thought she was saying 2% milk, so it was just a lot of confusion. But no, her mom was really good.
Yeah.
Just really willing to work with us. I think her name is Lindsay Jeffries.
Okay.
And she was really accommodating. Like, obviously it was, the priority was to, keep the baby safe and just make sure the baby was taken care of. But
yeah, of course,
baby did a great job. Yeah.
So that actually does lead me into, now that I've got you here, there are like so many questions about video production that I wanted to ask you. But before we move on, I would like to roll back, because the reason I even brought this up in the first place is because we were talking about traveling abroad and going to Scotland, and I wanted to ask, has being a video producer, has it brought you any opportunities to travel abroad for that position, or for that, like, has filmmaking brought you to any? Because I know we've done some stuff in Europe. I think Robbie went to
Isaac went to Europe.
Isaac went to Europe
to work on a oh gosh, what was it? I'm blanking on the client. Oh, Synchron.
Okay.
Which they do a variety of things. I'm trying to say it succinctly, but a lot of like heavy machinery.
Okay.
Like
a lot of our clients have a lot of heavy machinery.
Anyway, I'll come back to that if I can think of a better way to say it. But they help with like big companies that need systems to run a lot of their after sales market stuff and everything.
After sales market stuff.
As long as I just say that, I sound smart, but I honestly have no idea what it means. Anyway, Isaac went over to Europe. I have not been to Europe for work yet.
Okay.
So goals.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this then. Now that I got that out of the way, now I can ask you the real meat and potatoes questions here. You said you're a video producer, right? Mm-hmm. When I think of someone who is a filmmaker, I think of, very basic terms like director. I think of a producer as more like a business person who's just like getting people in meetings and and getting the people who do the things in a room together to figure, like, you've got director, writer, cinematographer, although I don't really know what that means.
A cinematographer is the person that takes care of all things camera.
Okay.
So sometimes they're the camera operator. Sometimes there's another person who actually operates the camera.
Okay.
Usually the cinematographer does operate the camera. And so they're the ones that are working with the director to pick out what lenses to use, sometimes what camera to use, different support items that are needed there. And they help the director kind of hone all their ideas into a achievable shot list.
Okay.
And the relationship between a cinematographer and a director looks different on every set.
Okay.
Sometimes the director's got everything lined up and they just need the DP to come and make sure, the lights are looking good. Mm-hmm. Sometimes DP? DP is cinematographer. It means director of photography.
I see. Okay. So those terms are used interchangeably.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
So sometimes it's like that. Sometimes the director has just massive ideas, but they haven't really honed it down, and the cinematographer or DP can come in and say, like, hey, have you thought about shooting it this way? So they can be as creatively involved as the director wants them to be.
So they're more of they're sort of like the sword in the director's what do you call it? Sheath.
Scabbard, yeah.
Where they're coming in saying, like, here's okay, I'm getting your idea. Here's how we actually make this happen through the lens of the camera.
Yes.
Or cameras.
Yeah, and to go back to the producer side of it,
the
producer is also, I guess you could say, I don't want to say they're the sword and the scabbard. They're more like the person buying all the swords, but but they're the ones that say, okay, how do we make your idea work from a logistical standpoint?
Okay.
Which what you were saying.
How much money do we have? Where can we afford to shoot?
Mm-hmm.
Things like that.
Yeah. Who can we bring on board? So the reason why I think we're called video producers here at Hatfield is that we are kind of jacks of all trades. Like when we're the lead on a project, we are directing it, but we're also kind of pulling all the pieces together. So
yeah, it's almost like you're like the manager of that project, essentially.
Yeah.
But as a video producer, that could encompass many different aspects of filmmaking. So you can't just say I'm the director.
Yeah.
Of Hatfield, because you're going to play one of many different roles on any one project.
Yeah.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, I think you know, it would be an ego trip to just be called the director. Like, we need to order a few director's chairs and have them on set every time we direct something.
Do you guys have
having the producer title keeps us grounded? Like, okay, we gotta do some of the
groundwork,
mundane groundwork as well. But
because you're going to be the one. Not only are you the creative force behind the project, you're also the one making it and seeing it through to becoming a tangible thing that people can watch. Yeah. Which I guess tangible is maybe not the best word, because you're watching, you're experiencing the film. You're not touching the film.
It, yeah.
You're not.
We're not into VR yet. Maybe we will get there, but
yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. It is cool, and that's something that is actually kind of unique to being in the position that we are here, where we can kind of have our hands in every aspect of the production, is that we do get to kind of edit, or at least oversee the editing of the project, where sometimes you might direct something and hand it off to an editor and then it's kind of in their court. But it's nice to be able to see a project from beginning to end and to feel like you kind of guided it along. That's part of what makes it feel like filmmaking sometimes, is that you do get to have a lot of creative input.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, we should maybe take this moment to tell the audience that you're not just here because you want to give me this massive opportunity to interview you about video production. You're also here to talk about your short film that you made over the course of 2-3 years?
Closer to 4 years, actually.
4 years?
Yeah, from script to being finished. Yeah.
Okay. And the film is called Caliburn, right? And I think at the time of recording, at the time that this episode is released, it should be available to the public, I believe, right?
Yeah, I think by the time this episode is out there, it'll be available on YouTube. So
okay,
yeah.
So here's let's take it back to kind of where we were discussing earlier. I wanted to talk about that relationship a little bit more between cinematographer and director, because another Hatfield coworker, Isaac, was the cinematographer on Caliburn, right? How can you tell me a little bit about how your relationship influenced the relationship between cinematographer and director? Because you guys obviously work together all the time. I'm sure you have a close working relationship, and I would imagine that came through in helping you create Caliburn, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been at Hatfield for almost 6 years now.
Oh wow!
And so producing Caliburn has actually been like more than producing Caliburn has been like a massive chunk of that time, as far as shooting most of it in 2020 and then doing pickups here and there.
Yeah.
So the relationship, as a director, and then with Isaac as the DP, that's kind of been honed over the past 4 years as well. So it's kind of cool to see the growth from when we shot the first frame to when we shot the last scene.
Oh yeah.
Just seeing our techniques improve, our working relationship get more focused. And I guess I should mention too that we actually went to school together in Hong Kong for a year. Isaac grew up in Hong Kong. I spent 4 years there. My parents were teaching over there, and we actually ended up going to the same university studying film. And now we're both at Hatfield. So we kind of
in Hong Kong or back.
No, we went to Asbury University, which is near Lexington, Kentucky.
Yeah, I know Asbury.
They've got a good film program. But we've been making short films together for like 15 years, which is crazy to think about. But we would make these fun little shorts that we would shoot in a couple hours at his house and then edit them that night. And it was just,
no way.
Yeah, it was fun. We had a couple friends that would kind of help us out with that too. But so it was kind of neat.
I'm so jealous of that. Like, I feel like as someone who is like just really starting to make content now, like I wish I had that where I'd been making film like at such a young age. I feel like I would have had a blast doing that. Were they like comedy short films or just
no? We actually
ideas?
I think we were kind of drunk on Christopher Nolan at that time, and so we were doing like psychological thriller type things. We had this. I think the first big one we did was for a media class at our high school. And the short film was called A Blurred Line, and it was about the blurred line between sanity and insanity. And we thought we were so deep, but we were just
better than Shutter Island.
Oh, it was leagues better than Shutter Island. I mean, as a sleeping pillow, it was way better than Shutter Island. But I think we had just seen The Dark Knight, and we were like, let's do something. Let's basically just copy the Joker. Yeah. And so I actually played this insane person who's in an asylum, and he ends up killing the nurse that's taking care of him and escaping. And then we did like 2 or 3 subsequent episodes of that character. It was just like, it was kind of the same thing every time. I end up killing someone, and you get a little bit deeper into my psyche. And it was kind of cool just to like it. If you've ever done a short film in like a really short amount of time, like where you just get together, you come up with a story and you shoot it and you edit it within like 12 hours. Okay. It's kind of a cool experience because you're like, you just got to get back to basics. Like you don't have time to write this epic film. Right. You have to just ask yourself, okay, what do we have at our disposal? Okay, we've got 3 of us here. And we've got 1 camera, and we've got this location that's within walking distance. That's kind of cool. Yeah. They've got cool lights set up or something. So
you're kind of letting the circumstances dictate the I guess the vision behind the project, because you're just being so, you're just using what you have to make something quickly.
Yeah, and I think that skill, we didn't realize that at the time, but that actually translates into what we're doing now, because sometimes, like with Caliburn, a lot of it was shot in Kentucky. Yeah. Some of it was shot in Ohio. Okay. But I'm trying to make it look like medieval Britain. Sure. Yeah. So you have to work with what you have. I had to find a location to shoot that had a lake and had like a lot of forest as well, so that I could do the primary conversation between King Arthur and the Lady of the Lake, which I guess, Caliburn it's an Arthurian short film. Yes.
I wasn't sure how willing you were to go into details about the plot.
Let's go into it, man.
You cool with it? Okay. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I have like no idea. I mean, I don't really know the story of King Arthur, so I was watching it like, who's that guy? And I think about halfway through, I was like, oh, that's King Arthur, I think, and I'm like, oh, there's Merlin. And then my girl was like, oh, that's Lancelot. That's the guy who stole his girl. And I was like, oh, okay. I had no idea that there was any of that going on. Right. But I don't know what my point to that was, other than to say, I feel like I had a unique perspective in that I was going into it not really knowing what was going on there, but still being able to kind of piece together. Because I feel like you do a good job of like the things that are significant to the actual story. I feel like you did a great job of either recapping that or like you don't lean on the fact that it's based off of an existing tale to communicate what's important about the film. If that
I'm glad you feel that way. That's part of the the thing that can be difficult about doing something that is already known by people is that you want it to be accessible to people that know nothing about it.
Yeah.
But you also want the people that know something about it to be happy with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I took some liberties with it. I didn't follow any particular telling of the story to a T. I just I took a lot of the scenes and the story elements that were known by people, because it kind of made it easier for me to not have to establish a whole bunch of backstory for every element. And it helped me to really focus on the aspect of it that I wanted to bring to light, which was a feeling of coming to the end of your life and feeling like it's in shambles, but then finding a way to go forward.
Yeah.
And doing that in a way where I didn't feel like I'd seen it done before in terms of King Arthur. But I'm glad to hear you enjoyed it as someone who doesn't know much about the mythos, because if it'd be my worst nightmare if someone just watched it like, what is going on? Like, why should I care about this?
Well, I was very fortunate. At the end, halfway through it, I'm like, who's that lady at the lake? And they're like, that's the lady of the lake. I'm like, oh, cool. That's great. That's great to know. They should have
come up with a more creative name. She's just Lady of the Lake.
Now, I will ask, so what was she like? What's her deal? What's her what was significant about her specifically that he needed to have this conversation with her?
Yeah, so in a lot of the tellings of King Arthur, which there's not really a definitive telling of King Arthur. Some people might not like me saying that, but
I thought it was a kid in King Arthur's court. I thought that was the definitive tale of King Arthur.
Yeah, no, I think it was the Disney version is the definitive one. No, but in a lot of the more well-known versions, he goes to the Lady of the Lake and gets a sword from her.
Okay.
Or he gets a sword from. She directs him to get the sword from the lake.
Okay.
So this hand comes out of the water and offers him a sword. So in some of the tellings, he actually gets in a boat and goes out and gets the sword from the hand. And so I was kind of playing with that idea of her being this guiding force for him. And I went in a slightly different direction with it, where instead of meeting her at the beginning of his rule, he goes to her at the end of his rule, or near the end of his rule. And you could, I kind of left it somewhat open where it's possible that he still met her when he was younger, but he's going to her now as an old man.
Okay.
And the sword that he pulled out of the stone, which happened also early on in his life.
Yeah.
The sword that he pulled out of the stone has been broken in battle.
Right.
And so he's kind of going to her.
Which causes, I think, and sort of an identity crisis, right?
Yeah, because it's like that was his defining quality, was I'm the king, and I'm the king because I pulled the sword out of the stone, and now it's broken. So
yeah,
what does that mean? I'm being assailed on all sides. Camelot is in shambles. My sword's broken. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And so it is kind of an identity crisis, because what do you do when that thing that defines who you are is suddenly no longer what defines you?
Right.
He's kind of having an existential crisis where he wants to move forward, but he also is looking back on all the brokenness and the mistakes that he's made, and feeling like, man, I almost hope that she tells me just to give up,
You're right.
Yeah.
It's like someone who's just terribly afraid of having to face the fact that they aren't living up to their expectation. And how do I move forward with that? That's what that's what I got from the film. Yeah. And then saying, you have to let it go. You have to move. I don't know if there was I don't know if I recall there being a why, but other than just you have to accept your flaws as they are, and recognize that you still have something to contribute, and that you should still contribute those things.
Yeah, like one of the key elements in Arthurian lore is that very early on in his rule, he is seduced by Morgan Le Fay, and I didn't include this in the short film, but
Justice League. I know this from the Justice League cartoon. I know about this.
I didn't realize there was a telling of this in the Justice League, but
a little bit.
Okay,
they touch a lot. Well, I mean, they've got to sell comics. You know, they'll take what they can get.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no better way to sell comics than to kind of use old stories, because that they'll translate, because they've been told for hundreds of years and they work. So
incorporating the legends of old with the legends of new.
So he is seduced by Morgan Le Fay, and I didn't include this in the film, but she actually is his half sister, and so that's kind of
interesting.
And he doesn't know that, but then the child that's conceived is Mordred, who ends up kind of being the seed of destruction for Camelot in some ways. So
yes,
there's this.
You're taking me back to that scene where he's talking about that now.
Yeah,
because I was like, "What's going on here?" He's with some chick and she's bad, and now the child's bad too. What's going on here?
Yeah, but that idea of there being kind of a sin that is running through the entirety of your life that you have to mitigate, you have to wrestle with the darkness that you've brought into the world, while also trying to make the most of what's been given to you. So so he makes that mistake, and that mistake he deals with it for his whole life, and that's it's a very relatable thing to feel like you're going for something, you're trying to live a good life, but there's this part of you that you're dealing with. It's kind of like your shadow, something that you can't quite shake. And if you try to just pretend it doesn't exist, well, it's gonna drum together a bunch of soldiers and come storm your castle.
Yeah, absolutely. What was that line? It was shadows follow all men.
A shadow clings to every man.
Yeah. But every man clings to one shadow, or something.
Yeah. So she says a shadow clings to every man, and then Arthur responds with, no, every man clings to a shadow.
Yeah.
And I think that she was trying to kind of be encouraging. The Lady of the Lake was trying to kind of say, like, listen, this is something. It is bad, but you're not the only man that's dealing with this. But he's still in kind of his cynical framing, where he's saying, and it's not just cynical, it is true. That men cling to things that are not. They try to cling to things that are dark and are sort of intangible. Well,
I think people in general have such a singular view of their life, and when it's very understandable for one particular event to sort of demand most of the real estate, if it's significant enough where you feel like it's really if it's caused enough of an impact that you feel like it's defined who you are, like, of course that's going to be the one thing that you that you obsess over until you feel like it's reached some sort of resolution. So I think it's, again, as someone, and I've very much advertised myself as not a fantasy guy. Like, I've been talking to Isaac about the Hobbit movies and the Lord of the Rings movies, because I've just now watched them for like the first time ever. So I'm not a fantasy guy at all. But that said, I still found the film to be extremely relatable in that sense. So I think you did a fantastic job.
Thank you. Yeah, if you're doing a fantasy story but it's not relatable, it's not really doing anybody any favors. Like, I think sometimes people feel like a fantasy story is supposed to take you somewhere else. Like they have a very escapist view of it, where oh, I get to take a break from life and go into this other world where I don't have any of the same problems.
Mm-hmm.
There's an element of that that's true, but I think what I like to see fantasy as is you're kind of going into an ultimate reality. Like you're entering a world where what someone says ends up being what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, you know, in our world, we lie and we say one thing, we do something else.
Sure.
Sometimes the images that we see are disconnected from the reality, you know, behind them. But with fantasy, you have the ability to tell sort of a cosmic story in a way that is relatable to everybody. So I don't necessarily see it as escapist so much as I see it as people lower their guard a little bit because it is a fantasy story.
Mm-hmm.
But then once they lower their guard, you can kind of hit them with something relatable, something universal. Because that idea of you know, a king who's broken and looking for a way to go forward. I mean, I'm not a king, but from a mythological standpoint, that same journey he's going through is a journey that everyone goes through, which is, you know, do I cling to something that I'm unwilling to let go of, or do I release it to a higher power and trust that something better will be given back to me? Like that is very relatable. And sometimes I think the reason that fantasy films and fantasy stories are so prevalent is that that they are more relatable than a lot of the stories we tell that are in a modern context. Because in some ways, the more modern and more localized a story is, in some ways it can be less relatable to people because it's so specific. But if you tell a broad mythic tale, which I think we can attest to the fact that stories like King Arthur are so long lasting. Like they've lasted for hundreds of years. They're still being told in countless different ways because people relate to it.
Right. They're still getting at something that's at the core of most human beings, which is, you know, how do I come to terms with failure, right? In this particular case, right? How do I come to terms with all of the things that I've done wrong, and how do I resolve that alongside the things that I wanted to do or am trying to do, and how do I make that whole picture look like what is expected of me, right?
Yeah, and I think sometimes when people take an old story and tell it nowadays, sometimes they can almost stop at the point where it's like you did bad things and you're less of a role model than we thought you were, and that's kind of where it ends.
Right.
But I really wanted to make sure that that he enters that darkness and he really senses that brokenness and that aimlessness and wondering where to go and wondering if he's even worth being redeemed. But then I wanted to actually see him redeemed, because I think that's powerful. I think it's too easy in a cynical modern context to just say, yeah, you know, King Arthur was just messed up, and here's how we really should view him, kind of being someone that we never should have looked up to in the first place.
Sure.
But I kind of like the idea of bringing him to that place of total self-doubt, and then having him like crescendo into the last few years of his reign, and kind of having that renewed strength to go forward.
I wanted to ask you this. So, you know, you said that this movie was made over the course of 4 years, right? When you first started making Caliburn, did you have that message in mind, or did it change over the course of the production?
I think the core message stayed the same. There were certain scenes and certain aspects of the story that ended up being more prevalent in the final cut than what I had initially scripted. But as far as that basic story, that pretty much stayed the same.
Okay. Because I was going to say, I feel like, for production, for any production that can take more than a year or two, I have to imagine it's very possible that, you always hear in big budget films, you always hear about rewrites and we had to cut this whole act out and blah, blah, blah. And how do we make that work for, for what we shot? Like that just sounds like such a difficult thing to have to, say you had a script that you wrote 4 years ago and then you shot it and then you were like, I don't really like what the message is now. How do I change that? Did you run into that at all?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of stuff that changed. The theme stayed pretty much the same, but one thing that kind of was really ephemeral until we actually shot it was the whole Lancelot Guinevere thing, which, Guinevere is Arthur's love, but she kind of falls for this other guy, Lancelot. And so part of the reason that it took so long to shoot this was that we were going to finish shooting in 2021, the spring of 2021.
Yeah.
And we got stormed out. And my wife was just about to have a baby,
sure.
Hector, which we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself very foolishly, we'll just wait till the baby gets here and then we'll find a way to shoot it.
Yeah.
And, babies make you a little bit busy for a while.
Yeah.
So it just kind of, and with work and everything, and it just ended up being a while before I was able to pull the pieces together and finish shooting.
Yeah.
But we were originally going to shoot at this small castle in Ohio called Loveland Castle. We were going to shoot a lot of the Camelot scenes there. But for a bunch of different reasons, I just didn't think that it was worth it to pull the production back after almost 2 years to that place. I felt like we could achieve what we needed to closer to home, in the Louisville area. And so that was one thing that changed, because I originally had scenes scripted where, Arthur would be there's a short little scene in the film where Arthur's looking at this map because he's going to go look for the Grail, the Holy Grail. And so he's kind of poring over this map, trying to figure out where to go. And originally I was going to have Lancelot there looking at the map with him, and then have this moment with looking up and seeing Guinevere, and it was going to be done in that way. And then I was going to have a shot of Lancelot, looking down from the castle ramparts or something like that. There's a bunch of different things I messed around with, and I just ended up shooting it a little bit simpler, where you have there's one shot in the film that establishes that Lancelot is one of Arthur's knights. Like he's behind Arthur as he's riding into Camelot. And then you have...
So it's nothing you say. You don't say Lancelot is a knight of King Arthur. The shot itself establishes that relationship.
Yes, that's the hope. Maybe to a fault. Yeah. I do not try to rely on dialogue.
Yeah.
Dialogue is really hard to nail.
Yeah.
I mean, the dialogue that we had in this film, like Bruce Purcell, who played older Arthur, and Kelly Lane, who played the Lady of the Lake, I mean, they were great.
Yeah. Fantastic performances.
But it's hard to tell a story of that kind and have it be believable, because you're trying to make people believe that it is ancient Britain, but you're also trying to have them speak in a way that is understandable and relatable. So with all the flashback sequences, I really wanted to rely on visual storytelling and make sure that if you don't see it in the shot, it's not going to work. You can't. And that's another thing that changed, was there's a duel between two characters, and the initial script, there's like conversation happening between them, and it was a little bit more of a full scene where you you have dialogue establish what's happening, and then you have the dramatic fight, and then you have the resolution to the fight. But partially because of time restraint, I just knew we weren't going to have time to direct a bunch of lines and make sure that every line sold. So I just was like, the lines aren't really necessary. What really matters here is that you cut into the scene with two characters who have been set up as being at odds with each other, and then you just have them fight it out.
Right.
And so the only line in that scene is from Guinevere, and she just yells no. And I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, but I think she might. I feel like apart from Morgan Le Fay cackling, I feel like that no is probably the only line in the flashbacks. Maybe I'm missing something.
That sounds right to me.
I think some people yell "Long live the king," but
well, if you're listening to this and you go watch it, let us know in the comments if we were right or not.
Yeah, the hope is that I kind of view dialogue as being, at least with this film, dialogue is kind of the texture that just makes you feel like you're in the scene. Dialogue can be very expository and almost didactic, like let me tell you what you need to know.
Right.
I viewed it more as, okay, anything that you hear is just part of the texture of the backdrop. Like I didn't want dialogue to be the main thrust. Yeah.
Which makes sense, right? I mean, dialogue is not you're not writing for the sake of hearing the words. You're trying to tell a story, and the dialogue is a tool for that. And in real life, dialogue is only used when needed, right? So if you're in a scene where it's mostly fighting, like there's probably not going to be a whole lot. In fact, that's probably why there is so much fighting, is because there wasn't a lot of dialogue ahead of time.
Yeah.
I
should have rewritten it where they're just like, you should have just talked to me, bro, and we wouldn't have had to do this.
Maybe if there was a little more dialogue, maybe, that could have saved some. Somebody could have,
No, it's just good old fashioned steel on steel, and that's how men talk to each other sometimes.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's a fantastic film. I was really taken aback by just the first 5 minutes. I mean, I was like, this feels like a scene in a big budget production movie. And you just recently won an accolade, right? At a film festival. You won Best Fantasy, right?
Yeah, I won Best Fantasy Film at I always butcher the name of it because it's a really long name, but the Action Sci-Fi Thriller Fantasy Festival.
Okay.
Which I didn't go to the festival, but I believe they're based in LA, and they screen a lot of different genre films.
Okay.
That was fun to get that little stamp of approval by a group of people that I don't really know.
Yeah.
Haven't interacted with before.
But who have seen a lot of movies.
Yeah, and to see that, okay, it's not just my friends and family that are saying, good job, Bryce, but get a real job soon.
Yeah. Do they offer any kind of feedback as well, or do they just say, nope, it was great, we loved it, you won?
No, it was actually really positive, just because they gave me a short video that was like an audience reaction video where they 4 of the people that had watched the film went back home and like recorded a little mini review where they talked about what they liked about it.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And then they also did a little short podcast interview with me virtually about it. And so there was a lot of promotion involved with it, which was really helpful for me to have material to, as I get ready to release it to the public.
Sure.
It's nice to have material like that to kind of use to drum up interest for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
right.
You too. I mean, I know you usually have comedians on here, so
yeah,
I've been told that I'm funny looking, but
you've had some zingers today. Okay,
but I'm glad that you opened up this opportunity for me, and hope it's been fun. But yeah,
it's been fantastic. Is there anything else you want to say about Caliburn before we wrap it up here?
Hope y'all enjoy it. Like I said, by the time you release this episode, it'll be on YouTube. Just type in Caliburn King Arthur short film. You should find it.
Caliburn with a C.
Yeah, Caliburn. And I didn't know this until after I wrote the script, but there's a vape pen that's called the Caliburn. So don't just type in Caliburn. Make sure you type in King Arthur short film.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, here's what you're going to do, guys. You're going to look up Caliburn. You're going to buy a vape pen. You're going to take that vape pen, sit down, look up Caliburn King Arthur short film. And while you are filling the room with those sick-ass clouds, you're going to watch a fantastic short film. He
did not get paid to say that.
Bryce, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Caliburn should be out now. Check it out. And any shout out? Real quick, I want to ask any other. I know that took you 4 years, but any ideas on your next project? What you want to do? Or
yeah, I've got some ideas. I'm going to be honing a script that I wrote like 6 years ago, based off of a short story by George MacDonald.
Okay.
He's a writer who was he wrote a lot of fantasy stuff, but he also wrote some he wrote a lot of different kinds of stories, but he was kind of the predecessor to Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. Like a lot of what they did was influenced by this author.
Okay.
And he has a short story that involves an enchanted mirror that kind of ensnares people into it. And so I wanted to explore that in a modern context.
Okay.
And make that accessible to people who might not have heard of him before. Like, he's a great author. He's written stories that have influenced the most well-known stories today, but hardly anybody knows his name. So
yeah,
that's kind of what's next on the docket, but
okay,
that's a while away. So
okay,
we'll see.
I love how I wrapped it up and I was like, answer one more question, please.
You're good, man.
All right, Caliburn, check it out.
All right.
See you, man.
See you.
Bye.